Hey everyone, I'm Canon EF, and in this video today we're gonna review one of the best adapted lenses to the GFX lineup. My GFX 100S is the camera filming me right now with the GF50 f3.5. This is my only actual GF lens, actual medium format lens that I use, but I also use a plethora of other 35 full-frame millimeter lenses that I adapt to the Fuji system via two different adapters. You can all go to the channel and check out other videos about other very interesting lenses, at least in my opinion. I own them. But this one, I think, is one of the best adapted lenses has to offer. This is the Tamron 45 f1.8 DI VC USD SP lens. This is one of the longest names in lens history, maybe. And let's go and explain what almost everything means, because actually I myself not familiar with each and every lettering here. So SP is Tamron's higher lineup of lenses. I don't know if they're still producing SP lenses, but this one and the 35 1.8 and I think the 90 f2.8 macro and the 85 f1.8 were all SP lenses. This means the construction is great. It's mostly metal, though it seems a bit thin, but it is this part is mostly metal. I think this part is also metal. The top thread is plastic, but very durable one, and the ring itself is very durable. I think I have this lens for over a decade by now, and it looks quite good. Some scuffs and everything, but looks and works excellently. 45 millimeters, well, we all know what that means, and f1.8 the same. VC means vibration compensation. It's an optical image stabilizer, which I don't use because I use the stabilizer in the camera, but it should be good. I think this one has some sort of malfunction that I remember from early days that I used it on a Canon 5D SR, and stabilized images would be kind of off. I never took it to the lab and see what's going on, because actually stabilization in 45mm is not something that I needed too much. USD, I think this is the focus model, which should be quick. On the GFX, it's not that quick, and it has an extremely long focus throw, since the focus range is pretty long, and we'll talk about it as we go down this review. But all in all, it's a very tightly assembled lens. It looks good. It has some sort of weather sealing, at least. A very nice focusing ring, at least compared to other AF lenses. And the bottom part is the Fringing EF GFX Pro adapter. Very nice adapter, which I use for all my EF glass. It has the aperture ring. It's made of metal, pretty robust, and will do, and of course transforms all sorts of electricity, and let me autofocus, and let me use this lens in face detection, eye detection, and whatnot. So pretty convenient. Without the adapter, it's a bit smaller, but then again, not a small prime lens. Nothing like nifty 50 f1.8. It's an excellent lens in terms of cover. It's one of the best that I own, and I own quite a few lenses which cover the sensor completely or almost completely, but this one covers the sensor in every aperture setting, in every focus settings, in infinity, and in a very close focusing distance, and it works great in that regard. It's not a GF lens, so it does have a fair amount of vignette, but it's mostly or entirely correctable, and there is some optical degradation when we're going to the extreme corners, which is kind of hard to repair or impossible to repair. But as we'll see in the next part of the review, it's not a showstopper, it's not a deal breaker, it's something that we can live with and work with, and the lens is still very, very capable. I use it for work, I use it for fun, relatively quick to autofocus, not as quick as the 50f 3.5 GF lens, but quicker than most of my other lenses, and that's considering its very long focus throw. So I think it's an excellent lens, and I also use it for most of my videos, since it can sufficiently track my eyes and face, and can do so in an f1.8 aperture that I don't possess in any of my GF lenses, which is just the 50. But you know, This Tamron also taught me a very important lesson regarding adapting lenses. At first, I use it with a very thin metal hood just for protection. I really like my lenses to have some sort of physical protection, so I can put them down and put the camera down on them. So if my little girls try to touch it, there is some sort of buffer. And when I first tested the hood, it shows no sign of any effect on the image, and of course I tested it at f1.8 because we all know that the worst vignette and the worst optical performance are at f1.8, and it has no effect on the image. But later on, as I was trying to take some landscape shots, some closer aperture shots, I found out that there is a slight vignette, and I thought, well, this is a 35mm lens. It probably has some vignette at the smaller apertures and focus to infinity. But I was wrong. It was, in fact, the hood. It was very slim and very narrow, but it did affect the lens. And once I took it off, this lens performs almost as good as a GF lens, covers the entire sensor at every aperture and focus settings, as mentioned before. And I think the important lesson is that adapting lens is an extremely sensitive practice. It requires everything that's possible to not obstruct the light path into the lens, and this lens proves it. Just a small, I think it was less than 1 centimeter or a third of an inch thick, and it actually obstructed the lens. And I actually presume that the filter itself, I have a UV filter, a protective filter on it, I presume the filter itself also damaged the quality of the lens a bit, but I would like the lens to stay intact. It's been with me for over 10 years, and I would really like to keep it with me. So this is the kind of compromise that I'm willing to do, and with the filter, the lens is also very good. If you want to go and test the lens technically to the highest end, you should get rid of the filter, but in this channel I try to give some field experience to talk about how the lens performs, and I think filter is something that I would use on all my lenses at every situation in order to keep them safe and keep the longevity over time. So this is this Tamron, and this is a very important lesson. Now we're going to take a look at the images that I've shot with this lens and get rid of the screensaver that I've just got. So let's go there and then come back to conclude. Okay, so here's a sample from my Tamron 45 f1.8 SPVC blah 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 blah. Some of them were shot before I took off the little metal hood, and some of them, most of them were shot after I did it. So I'll show both, of course, because they demonstrate different features and traits of the lens. Some of them will just see to get the vibe and colors and the rendering of the lens, and some will dive into a bit deeper. So without further ado, let's start. Okay, so here is a panoramic image that I shot for a Pilates instructor. It was shot at 65 by 24 because I still used the hood back then, so I worked with a 65 to 24 or with 1:1 crops. And as you can see, it's heavily cropped. And we do have some vignettes, not too bad because it's on f1.8, and at f1.8 the vignettes weren't so bad, but at smaller aperture they were. We can see the rendition of the rising sun. We can see just how processed this image is. It is what it is. Let's take a look at the bokeh. So here we can see the bokeh is not the cleanest, and we do have some green and maybe purple fringing, and we do have some onion rings and whatnot, but the rendition as a whole is nice. We can see very decent sharpness in what's in focus, and this is on 200%, not 100, so extremely sharp even at f1.8, at least in the middle of the frame. And the rendering is nice. It gives some sort of depth to it. This is the full frame image. We see some slight vignettes, but It's with the hood and at f1.8. It's also very close focusing, and in 1.8 we shouldn't see too much of a vignette, and we see the very thin depth of field. And let's take a look at the details. We can see every tiny detail in the skin and hair. It's almost scientific. So very sharp indeed in the focused areas, and very, very soft and mushy outside of them, but that's in close-up, and it is to be expected in such close focusing. Here's another image of my friend with his Mamiya RB67. Let's take a look at the details on the camera. And here we can see quite heavy purple fringing, but it is correctable. So let's start, and if we take it about as far as here, or maybe as here, it's almost completely corrected. We haven't touched the vignette yet. I think if we'll just slide it, yeah, well, that's too much. So very nice details. This is 200%. We can see them on the camera, which is what's in focus. And we can see that the out of focus rendering looks kind of nice. Looks a bit smooth and pretty nice. We see excellent details in the skin. There's like a tiny little hair here, and it's just excellently rendered all across the focused parts of the scene. Here's another image of sunprints with my daughter. Let's take a look into them. For some reason, this is on Adobe Color, and I'll switch it to Provia Standard. Let's see how it goes. Looks much nicer. Let's dive into the image. This is at f4.5 at 1 to 5,000 of a second, ISO 400, which is in fact ISO 100 with the DR set to 400%. So this should be like the sharpest setting of the lens, and it doesn't disappoint. It is extremely sharp. This is 200%. We can see every detail of those dry flowers and thorns and whatnot and leaves and paper and pavement. So everything is very, very visible, very sharp. Here's a very nice sunset on the beach, which indicates the depth, the pop that this lens can provide. This is at f1.8. We can see quite heavy vignettes on the 65 to 24. Let's try to take care of those. We just slight nudge to the vignetting slider all the way up to the end. We can mitigate most of the vignetting. And let's dive into the detail part of it. So here we can see that f1.8 isn't the sharpest setting, but it is relatively sharp. We can see very fine details on the backpack. We can see relatively fine details on the cloth, on the chair and whatnot. We can spot the aberrations here, the green and purple fringing on the out of focus people. But all in all, I think if you want to get the vibe, like the 3D pop or how you want to call it, this lens delivers. I think it delivers much better than an f2.8 like the GF one, because it has some power of blurring the background, even in these kind of images where everything is further away from the sensor and the camera. So in that regard, it's a very nice lens. This is a dance performance that I've shot. There is the stage in the middle and crowd from all around the stage. And I used it with the hood, so there might be some vignette. And most images are cropped because as I delivered them, I didn't want the 45mm field of view in every image, and the extremely high resolution of the GFX 100 enables me to crop significantly, thus turning this kind of kit into, let's say, kind of a zoom lens based on crop, because nobody actually needs 100 megapixels for this kind of job. So it's very convenient to just crop afterwards. It does present the computer with some toll because the files are extremely heavy and hard to work with, but you know, it is what it is. So let's take a look. We'll mostly just look at the image to see the rendering and everything, and if there's something important, then we'll dive in. Okay, so in this image, I took advantage of the stabilizer in the camera in order to use a bit slower shutter speed to emphasize the movement. And the nice thing is that the static parts remain static, while what's moving get this very interesting blur that gives a very special feeling to this image. Let's take a look at another one. So we can see the same thing here, the motion that this camera lens combo enables allow me to use much slower shutter speed than I would normally use. This is 1/10 of a second, and we can see some blur even in the static parts, but it's not too bad, and it does emphasize the motion of the moving parts in the image. Here we can see the lens's reaction to light coming straight into the lens. We have this here, and I think this comes from either this light source or maybe this light source, but there are some flares and ghosting and whatnot. It's not too bad, and it's something that you can expect, and it doesn't bother the entire thing. Here again we see the 1/18 of a second at ISO 200, and it's also mostly good enough for motion. I wouldn't say the AF is super sharp, but in situation like this, where you can anticipate where the denser will be, and you can focus and then leave the focus locked on the specific location, it works excellently, and I think everything in this image is sharp where it should be sharp. Let's take a look. So yeah, we can see what's in focus is in focus and relatively sharp. The man just jumps, so it's not tack sharp, and there's no strobe light or anything of that sort. But it's more than enough for my needs. And one last image. And here again is the use of slow shutter speed. This is at 1/4 of a second, 1 to 4 at f7.1. This is how sharp the image is, and this is how extremely blurred are my daughters running around in the museum. And I really like this this part in the lens. As much as I can remember, this is only based on the camera IBIS and not on the lens stabilizer. I believe the camera IBIS to be better than the lens image stabilizer. And my specific lens used to have some problems with the VC unit, so I'm not using it that much. This is the new age. This is when I took off the lens hood, and we can see the relatively straight lines. I think it's not corrected, but let's double check. No, it's not corrected. Let's try to correct it with the profile. So we'll go all the way down to Tamron. And then it chooses the 45, and it looks kind of pincushiony, but let's try to straighten it and see. Yeah, it looks pretty straight to me. So I think it's well corrected, especially for a sensor 70% larger than its intended design. Let's take a look at the details. This is at f8, ISO 400, DR 400%. So you can see decent sharpness, decent details in the center of the image. Let's take the hike all the way up to the corners. Here it's still okay-ish. And this is the extreme corner. We can see the fringing are stronger than in other areas. And in the far extreme corners, we can see some degradation. It's not too much, it's not too bad. I think it's still manageable and you can still work with it. But it's not at the level that a GF lens would provide us. Let's take a look at the other corner. We might be able to spot degradation, but again, this is by no means a deal breaker, at least in my eyes. So, of course, everybody has different standards, and every kind of job or project have different standards, but to me, it looks great. Another important point to make is that from here on out, no image is cropped. All images are the full frame of the GFX, meaning 44 by 33 millimeters, 100 megapixels with all the perks and whatever's of the GFX sensor. Let's take a look at the giraffe in the center of this image. So we can see decent details. There's actually another giraffe here, which I haven't seen. This is something I like about the GFX 100. You can see so many things when you retro looking at the images back on the computer. So this is f7.1. It should be sharp, and it is relatively sharp. Just making sure that we all know this image is shown at 200%. Not 100, but 200%. So it's not pixel level sharp, but it is very sharp, and it is to show just how good this lens is. We can see the background, which is pretty further away. We're at f7.1, and everything in the background is relatively sharp. Now let's climb up to the corner and see how the leaves look. Here we can start and see the signs of degradation, and in the extreme corner we can actually see them pretty clearly. But we're talking about, let's say, 10–15% of the image that are blurred in a way, and it's not easily correctable, if at all, but a minor crop will probably take care of such things. And we're talking about this portion of the image. Of course, it's irrelevant in the sky. It's probably irrelevant here also. Yes, it's not as technically fine, and it's not as sharp as Fujifilm lenses. And if you're the kind of landscape photographers, yes, by all means, take the GF lens. I think GF lenses gives us the best results, frame wide, corner to corner, and they're amazing. And I personally really love the 50 f3.5 for that kind of purpose. But if I want to go and do some occasional shoot, or try something a bit wider, or try an f1.8, no Fuji lens actually give that to me at the moment, and the only one coming close is the 55 f1.7, which is an amazing lens, but it's by far not as affordable as this Tamron lens. You can check your nearest eBay or Amazon or B&H or whatnot, and see how much this lens costs. I don't know, it kind of changes across time, but it comes nowhere near the GF55 f1.7. So Fuji don't give us any comparable lens. I think this is much better than the Fujifilm 45 f2.8 in regard to wide aperture. It gives us something completely different, a level above the f2.8. So it's really some kind of compromise that you probably have to do if you want a pristine image. Yeah, GF is the way to go. But if you're willing to compromise, I think this one will work, will do just what it takes. And as somebody who have shown some of his image, have exhibited image in museums and galleries, I think it's fair to say that the edges don't matter that much. People don't go and obsess over them. So I think this lens is an excellent performer in that regard. Here are the very fine straight lines of the lens with no corrections at all. Let's take the profile correction again and see how it goes. We go to Tamron. Oh. And it seems extremely corrected. Everything looks pretty fine to me. So while it may not be the best lens for architecture and everything, it does a fairly decent job in this regard. Okay, so this image looks okay now, but I took it down to 1.8 of a second to shoot it in f4 and in relatively low ISO setting of 800. Let's take a look. Yeah, and it seems like I've missed it by about 1 or 2 stops of shutter speed, and the image isn't sharp. This is something we should bear in mind, and I think I just took too much of a leap of faith here. Let's take a look at another image. And here it's 1/9 of a second, 1/9 of a second, and yeah, not good enough. I probably should have raised the ISO, but you know, it is what it is. And here it's f4, 1/40 of a second. Let's take a look. And this looks quite sharp and nice. Every detail is very apparent. No significant fringing are visible, but it doesn't mean they're not there. And I think if we look closely, we may see them like in here or in some specific spot. As we draw close to the corners, we see the slightest degradation, but in my opinion, it's not too bad. So this one was shot at f2.2. Let's check it out. And we see the sharpness in the middle of the frame at f2.2 is quite decent, even quite good. The focus is lost very quickly, but when it is sharp, it is sharp. And since there's no exceptional detail in the corners of the frame, we can use the entire image with no worries whatsoever. The same goes to this one. And here's an example of the bokeh of the image. Here we can see some cat's eye, and they're very apparent. I believe cat's eye are apparent in the full frame crop also, but in the middle they look quite nice. Let's dive into them and see how the bokeh itself looks. So the bokeh balls are not as smooth. They have pretty apparent onion rings, and they're not as clean. They have some sort of boundary, which is not the most pleasant when looked up close. But I think as a whole the image looks nice. But when you dive into it, it's not the best bokeh that I've seen. And let's take a look at the bokeh next to the edges. Yeah, here things get significantly worse. So take that into account. Let's take a look at the sun in the frame. And I must admit that the fringing are not as bad as I believe them to be. Let's go to the manual and see. No, I haven't fixed them at all. So yeah, not that bad. Let's play with the exposure and stuff just a bit. The highlights a bit down and the whites a bit down. We have a decent amount of details. This is mostly sensor and it's not the lens, but it is quite an amazing sensor, if you ask me. Of course, now the image doesn't look good, but you know, we have the details there. We can do whatever we want with the image itself. Let's take a look at the fine details here. So yeah, pretty fine. All across the large middle portion of the frame. This is at f11. Let's take a look at the details all across the frame and the focal depth. Next to the corners, as mentioned, it starts to wear off, but we can actually see the very thin raindrops here. We can see the structure of the window, the structure of the metal. We can see mostly everything, every important detail. We can actually see the little algae and mold and whatnot. We can see the road, we can see the road signs, we can see practically everything, and it is relatively in focus. The maximum aperture in terms of the smaller aperture is 16, which is sometimes not enough in my opinion. I would prefer 22 or 32. So here are some close-up shots. They're not macro shots per se because, well, you know, the lens isn't a macro lens. It doesn't give us a life-size reproduction ratio, but it does give us some very decent close-ups or close-up ability. It will be excellent for details in whatever shoots you do, if you want to shoot the rings in a wedding or whatnot. This is quite nice, and it elevates this ability because most normal lenses will focus down to 50 centimeters, 45 centimeters. This one will go as close as 29 centimeters from the sensor itself, so pretty close to the front element. And it's pretty sharp also. This is some sort of a diamond in a diamond museum, and while not tech sharp, this is hardly perfect macro conditions. This was shot at f4.5 at 1/40th of a second at ISO 1000 with no stabilization, no tripod, no monopod, nothing. But it does the job. It gives us the ability to go closer and provides us with ample details. So not a macro lens, but an excellent close-up lens. Now let's conclude. So to conclude, the Tamron 45f1.8 is, in my opinion, one of the best adapted lenses on the GFX. It covers the whole sensor, it does it sufficiently well, it gives us excellent image quality in the center and decent to acceptable image quality in the far corners, and it gives us an amazingly open aperture of f1.8 on a wide lens, which let us kind of create a popping image, let the subject pop out of the image, even in relatively wide 35-ish in terms of full frame. And this is, it's a very nice lens to use. It's comparable to 35f1.4, I believe. So it's kind of a sweet spot for documentary photography, for environmental portraits, and for actual landscape. And it's not as big as some other lenses, though not as small. It gives the camera some sort of heft to it. It is a two-handed kit, but very convenient. About focusing speed, well, I don't know if it's fast enough for high octane action imagery. I'm not sure I would go with it to shoot a full wedding, but it does the job most of the time. It does the job with relatively static objects. It does the job with my young girls which are running around, and sometimes it needs just a nudge of manual focus to, you know, get things back together, especially if it's focused all the way to close-up and then you try to focus to the far end or the other way around, but you know, the focus ring is readily available. And another nice thing, especially if you're doing video, there is a relatively long throw, not compared to cinema lenses, but compared to other AF still or hybrid lenses. And the lens is mechanically connected, mechanically geared to the focus system. So it's an actual linear movement and not some linear simulation or whatever you got with the Fuji fly-by-wire lenses. All in all, an excellent performer, one of my no-brainer lenses if you're getting into adapting full-frame lenses to the GFX, highly recommended.